Well, good morning, everyone. Jen Al-Beik's talk is called Finding My Track, Railroad Photography as a Creative Outlet, Perspectives as a Newcomer to the Hobby. Jen is a veterinarian by trade and took up a passion for railroad photography after her son became interested in railroads. As a newcomer, Jen enjoys rail photography as a creative outlet and takes images from both the ground and from the air by drone. I've been following and enjoying Jen's work now for a couple of years on Instagram. So those of you that would like to see more after the presentation, please visit her site. She's a terrific talent. Jen?
Thank you so much for that great introduction. I guess I'll get right into it. Let's see. Forgive me, I don't do this often. All right, can you see that all right?
That looks great. Yeah, it looks great to me.
Awesome. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak to you all. I'm very impressed with what you guys are trying to do, and I'm very flattered that, I've only been doing this for 2.5 years. But that you like my work and you want to hear more about it. So a little bit about me. I graduated from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in 2001 with a bachelor's of biology. And I went to Tufts Vet just around the corner from where I am now to get my doctorate. I have been an artist pretty much all my life. My art teachers had always wanted me to pursue a career in art, but I was driven to become a vet. I love animals. That's what I wanted to do. But I still have, my first medium has been pencil and then paint and then camera. I bought a camera, which was a point and shoot, but I had fun with that. And then I finally bought my first camera, 7 years ago. I still have it. I still use it every time I'm out chasing trains. But I actually took my first real train photo like on purpose only 2.5 years ago. And so my son actually, we'd be driving home from daycare and we'd stop at the Grafton and Upton. It's a local short line just down the street from where I live. And we just look at the engines. And occasionally we'd see the MBTA go by because it's on the Boston Albany main line. And once in a while we would see a CSX train, and my son would really want to see more freight trains. So I was like, okay, well, I have no idea what I'm doing. But let's see what I can find out. And found the steaming tender in Palmer that has railroads coming through, trains coming through pretty often. And so we went there and I photographed my first train there in April 2019. And there was a thrill about it. My son had fun. I mean, he's loved riding trains for, as long as I can remember. And now we're photographing them, so it's a little bit different. And there's the component of adrenaline that I like, knowing that a train's coming, knowing that I can kind of compose a shot and have it come out the way I want it to. So, and he's kind of been my little sidekick with me for pretty much everywhere I go. And I'm glad that I'm able to take him with me to see those new sites. So I started asking people on social media mostly, like, all right, I'm new to this. I don't know what's around. I found out that Norfolk Southern trains, I had seen them in Kentucky. I found out we had them here. So I went to go check those out. And so it was a whole new line to photograph. So there's an image there from May 2019 of the Pan Am Southern 23K. And then I saw my very first heritage unit a month into this endeavor. I thought that was pretty cool. And then in the lower right corner there, those are the engines that we would be seeing every day. And sadly, some of them are not there anymore. So even in the short time I've been doing this, there have been a lot of changes. But I really found I enjoyed this, and it's completely different from anything that I do normally. And everyone who's in the railfan community has been really helpful. They've been taking, they say, hey, come with me. We'll go see this particular spot, and they'll show me their favorite spots. and I just learned so much. Everyone's been really nice, and constructive criticism is always great. Um, tell me that, the do's and don'ts of rail fanning, don't trespass, don't get into the engineer's way, that kind of thing. But for the most part, it's been a very positive interaction with just about everybody I meet. So I just started getting out there with my camera, just shooting whatever I could. There's a shot here from Boston South Station, just people getting off the train. And then the stuff that's local to me, which is in Worcester, Massachusetts. So that's the Providence of Worcester and also the CSX yard. Even tried my hand at a little bit of night photography with the ambient light that we have around us. Also forgot from my childhood that Conway Scenic is really not that far away from me. And they had a rail fan weekend. So I took full advantage of everything they had to offer, including a night photography class. So borrowed some flashes. We had the steam engine out and took a lot of photos, but I think my favorite of the night was the one without the flashes. It's kind of magical in a way, kind of as a Polar Express feels to me. Yeah, I think this is one of my favorites of that night. And then I would take occasional days off from work to just, it was a mental break for myself. Vetmed is a difficult profession to be in. I love it. I wouldn't do anything else with my life, but it's good to have something else that I can do that's doesn't have anything to do with animals and people. It's just straight photography and trains. Of course, it's always good to see my friends out there too, but this is just something I can focus on for myself. And I would discover new locations based on what my friends would see, and then I would also look on some of the map apps I have just to try to figure out what works. This is the Pan Am office car special a year and a half ago, before they painted one of the coach cars there. But this is Leominster, Massachusetts. And they're actually out and about today, but without the FP9 units today. This is my local railroad. This is the Grafton Upton. They're no longer running the black and yellow units that were in the previous photo, but they're running some of these MP15 units back and forth. So they're relatively easy catch in my backyard. And this is probably one of the more popular spots for this particular railroad. This is the old Upton road crossing. So if you go searching for a Grafton and Upton, chances are it's one of these photos will pop up from this location. It's a great little railroad to chase, though. And a lot of my friends actually work there. And before the pandemic hit, we had a lot of different excursions out. I know Mass Bay Railroad enthusiasts had this excursion, having some of the Cape Cod Central units. This is one of their old FL9 units, leading excursion through Fall River. These engines haven't been on these rails for years, and so it was very cool that they're able to arrange this excursion for people who are on board, take advantage of the passenger excursion. For all of us photographers, it was a field day for all of us. Everybody was out. It was a great time. It was we were keeping each other apprised of where the train is, and we're planning our next shots as we go along. That was a great day. We also had local excursions. This is the Providence and Worcester Railroad, where they ran their fall foliage trains. We haven't had them for the past 2 years because of the pandemic, but we're hoping that, I think they're supposed to be having their Polar Express train come back this year. So really looking forward to getting back out there for this. Because these are trains that run on this line usually during the weekday we're at work, or overnight we're definitely asleep. This was a day where it was bitterly cold, but the coal trains had come back to Massachusetts and we're going to New Hampshire. So a lot of us were out braving that cold. There were about 7 of us, I think, at the roof at the Worcester Union Station to catch the coal train coming into town. but it was a great vantage point. It is for one of my favorite spots to go just hang out. And we had, I think, about 12 of those different trains, and so I think a lot of us got different shots. This is in Charlton, Massachusetts. This was my first time visiting the Springfield Amtrak station, and I wanted to include this shot just because I thought it's pretty simple, but it's pretty cool. It shows some of the creative art in the background on that wall of that building. Shows the new platform versus the old platform, and just a tied down engine waiting for its crew. So I rather liked how this one came out. It was my first time at the station, so I was just looking everywhere, every different angle, and trying to get a feel of what this place is really like. And then 2020, well, that was just an interesting year to begin with. It was a year of a lot of changes for all of us. It was also the year that the Hoosick Tunnel collapsed and totally changed Pan Am's way of doing things. It closed off their main line, and so they had to run all of their freight over the Vermont rail system line. So I hadn't been to Vermont in 10 years. It was a wonderful time. It was a wonderful way to get me out of the house, get up there, and see things I hadn't seen before. My son hadn't been up there either, so it was his first time traveling anywhere like that. So this is actually Pan Am engine leading their combined train, heading to Hoosick Junction from Rutland, Vermont. I mean, everyone was out for this, but I've never seen such, great images, and just everywhere was just beautiful. So just adding the train to the background was incredible. I mean, on a day, if I was chasing the Vermont rail system, I might get a bunch of red engines, but today I got Pan Am. So it was a way to get me to see more of everything. And some days, I would go out and I wasn't really sure what I was going to see. And some days I was like, oh, I don't know, this is kind of backlit, not sure it's going to work. But I included this one as a reminder for myself that not everything has to be perfectly lit. I love this image because it's old style power leading a train. Actually, it doesn't even come by anymore. We don't have this particular job coming through this particular line anymore. But I love it because you have the exhaust and you kind of have the sun kind of illuminate it from behind. And I could put this in black and white and have it say it was like 20 or 30 years ago. So I really liked that I was able to capture this engine in this particular way. And then back to Detours, as they were running those detours for months up there until the Hoosick Tunnel was reopened. Got to see things that I never thought, or anybody thought they'd see over this. This is the Vermont rail system of Cuttingsfield Bridge, and here we see big Norfolk Southern Power bringing auto racks in. It's just an incredible image to me. It was one of my favorites from February last year. And so I think 2020, even though COVID was happening, rail fanning was still something that I could do. It wasn't inside activity. I wasn't like in groups of people, or for the most part. And rail operations were still happening. So when I wasn't working, or if I took a day off, I would try to find something new. In this case, this is the Milford Bennington Railroad. They run stone trains and managed to capture them on one of their runs on this day. I like seeing these kind of operations. They may not be around for forever, but at least I get to see it today. And I have photos, and I still think about the things I have seen. This is probably one of my favorite images from last year. The Pan Am office car special again, but I was told to go check out this bridge by a friend. Of course, I went to the top of the bridge and I was thinking, all right, well, the vantage point's okay, but then I actually looked at the bridge and it was like, this is a really cool bridge. I need to photograph this. So even just without the train, it was still a very cool image, but adding not just any train, but this train really made this photo for me. I was ecstatic when it came out, the way I had envisioned. And then I finally made it out to New York, to the Selkirk area, where see it. One of the CSX operations is the bigger yards in the area. At the request of a friend, and he took me to all his favorite spots in the area. Saw so many trains that day. Honestly, this is still my favorite shot of the whole day. It's the going away shot, but it just captures how I felt at the end of the day. It was just an amazing day. And it's such a great thing to do, like with my time. It's going to see these places. And so this is actually another local railroad to me, but it's also very hard to find. I happened to, a friend of mine told me that the teal engine was in front of the auto rack train, and I have to come check it out. So that I did. This engine doesn't come out very often, so I was very happy to get it. Maybe one of these days I'll actually model that on HO scale, because it's just such a pretty thing. Continue with the theme of detours for 2020. The MBTA had part of their line disrupted, and so they had to bring a bunch of engine and coach sets across somehow to get to Boston and back to Worcester. So the Grafton Upton had recently completed their railroad extension to Milford, and that therefore they could extend the line to Franklin. And so the MBTA actually took advantage of that brand new reopening of the line and sent a bunch of sets. And of course, really, really upset a lot of the residents of the town of Grafton, where I live, because people were thinking, oh no, is the MBTA commuter train going to be running through my backyard? As it is, a lot of people are really happy about the twice-a-day freight train they get going through their backyard. So having the thought of having commuter trains going through their backyard really kind of set them off. But it wasn't to be. It was just for like a couple of days. But I was really happy that I at least I could catch that. I actually caught this during my lunch hour, unbelievably, since it's so close to where I work too. 2020, I also took my first vacation centered around just trying to take in as much as I could for rail photography. And so the best place that was within relatively close driving distance was Pennsylvania. So I went to, the first place was the Delaware-Lackawanna Railroad, and got to see these lovely RS3s working. It's great to see Alcos still working and still functioning so well. And actually this past year, I got to meet the Alco doctor who retired like a week later. So he was one, I know he and his crew got these engines working, and they work so well. And it's great to just, when I'm down there, I can see them working, and it's part of history still at work. This picture kind of reminds me of what it was like being in this area during COVID times. This is Steamtown, also in Scranton, and it was just, there was not much open. A lot of the museums have been closed. There were a lot of there were mass requirements to go in here, and there wasn't a lot open there, so we could go into the roundhouse though. It was quiet. There just weren't a lot of people there. And every time I look at this photo, it just reminds me of that experience. There was nothing running. It was quiet. But other things were running, and this was the Northern, and the Reading and Northern line was absolutely still running on all their freight trains on time every day. I had to go see that. I almost fell off the fence here because I didn't realize that the fence was about as tall as I was. So I was kind of balanced precariously on it just as the train came around. Next time I'll bring a step stool. That trip was also the trip I wanted to bring a new lens I had so I could try 300mm close-up shots of the Rockville Bridge. And rather like the result. This was also the trip where I really want to see this little switching operation, the Juniata Valley Railroad. And I wish I could show you the video because this is probably one of the most favorite things I've ever shot. But we're coming around the corner. It was pouring rain. Norfolk Southern intermodal train was coming around the corner in Lewistown, Pennsylvania. And I got him on my phone. And we're kind of pacing the train. And just around as we turned the corner, there was a Juniata Valley switcher. And she was in perfect position to just grab a still shot. And actually, we were like this, there's steam coming off the top of the engine, and the rain is just pouring all over it. And I think today is probably still one of my favorite images. If I ever do a calendar, I'll put that in there. Back home, I was exploring other things I hadn't seen before, realizing that Cape Cod actually ran excursion trains. I had to go check it out for myself, especially since they have a really cool train bridge over the Cape Cod Canal. This is a train that had just crossed over the canal into Buzzards Bay. And so I was able to kind of catch this one. I really like the lines in this one. It's a very different perspective. And I also learned that the bridge is actually not straight. Those rails are actually on a curve. I wouldn't have gotten that without the telephoto lens. This is another operation I probably should visit more often because it's actually not that far away. This is the Essex steam operation down in Connecticut. And I don't do a lot of black and white conversions, but I actually like this one because it's hard to tell immediately how old this image is. In days when I'm not on call, sometimes I'll get word of something that is a little bit further away, but I really want to see it. So the Central Maine and Quebec Railroad had closed down earlier in 2020. It had been purchased by Canadian Pacific. I'd really hoped to have seen their barns before that happened, and it didn't happen. I mean, Maine is a 5-hour drive for me. It would have been very difficult logistically with my little kid. So when I heard that barns were leading the Herzog train just outside Albany, New York, I jumped in the car and just left. It just went to go after it. And there were a lot of other people out that day for that particular train. So it was kind of cool to see. And as I said, 2020 was the year of detours, and even rail systems had their own detour. So they're running daylight trains over the New England Central tracks. And in this particular this is Claremont, New Hampshire, and they're running over this particular line. So it's odd to see daylight trains on this particular track, unless it's Amtrak or New England Central Extra. So it was a real treat to be chasing these. And I think several of us went out time after time after time because they kind of seemed to have a rhythm to them, so we could get them different locations. But that's one of my favorite photos from that particular chase that day. Again, Conway Scenic. I think this is probably a shot that a lot of people might be able to get. This is Frankenstein Trestle, and we have Mount Washington in the background. It screams New Hampshire. And I will show you another photo of this location later, but just so you have an idea, this is a local freight that runs every few days from Framingham to Leominster. And this is a famous location. A lot of people have photographed this particular train here. This is CSX B724, a swamp in Sterling, Massachusetts, and it's just an odd place for a train. You can barely see the tracks. There's not a lot of ballast that you can see from this particular angle, and it just looks very much out of place. That's why I like it. It's so very unique for our area. And Berkshire's in autumn. It's one of my favorite places to be. Just the colors are amazing. This is one of the Housatonic engines, Bangor Rustic 22. They're just shoving some cars into their siding while the CSX comes up along the main line of Boston Albany to drop off some cars. But the colors in this image, it's one I printed out for myself. And I think as I reflected this image, I think about how far I've come in just such a short amount of time. I took this picture on Halloween 2020 because it was a weird year. Why not? It snowed the day before, and when I got up that morning, it was really cold out. I thought, wow, the snow is probably not coming off the trees anytime soon. I should see if there's anything out to take a picture. Sure enough, I heard that CSX QO22 was coming around, so went out to Spencer, Massachusetts, to the Curve, where I really like this location, and caught this photograph. I like this one so much; it's hanging up in my house. I used it for my Christmas cards. The picture I took on Halloween for my Christmas cards, and is probably one of the top 3 images I've taken that I love. It just completes it of everything: composition, color, and the subject matter. A single engine leading the intermodal freight. But I think 2020 in general was just, it was getting me farther and farther away from my starting point. I was willing to take more risks in trying to figure out, how far I could go, to try to get the images I wanted and see the different kinds of places there are. I mean, honestly, within a 2-hour driving radius, you can see so much. And even if you go just a little bit further, you can see a little bit more. So I try to keep, I do keep pushing the distances there. My favorite days were FOMR Fridays. I would take a Friday off and try to go see preferably a short line, something that I couldn't see on a weekend, and see what I could do with it. This is the Four River Transportation Railroad. It's a small little short line that operates from Quincy, Massachusetts to Braintree, and here they are shoving a bunch of cars into the Braintree yard. I happened to catch probably the last of the fall foliage for 2020. And interestingly enough, this is actually after the Halloween shot. All the snow has since melted. And more of Cape Cod, probably maybe for this year's Halloween card, Christmas card, because I actually have some Christmas trees to take pictures of, that I have pictures of now. And there's a picture of the bridge from a different perspective. It's a very cool bridge. If anyone ventures to Cape Cod and hasn't seen it yet, it's definitely just worth watching that bridge. During the holiday break, went out to Hudson, New York, just for this one particular train. There's not a lot of street running near us, so Hudson's really not all that far away from us, and had to ask a few friends to see if actually they're running the grain train that day. So Hudson, New York is probably famous among rail fanners for having the street running grain train come through once or twice a day. I had to see it for myself. I have to go back. And to end 2020, of course, because nothing was really normal, we had a couple trains doing PTC tests. This is the New Hampshire North Coast, one of their engines. They have a wonderful railroad. They really do keep their engines clean and beautiful. And they are running PTC tests using MBTA equipment. So on a very cold end of December morning, a lot of us were out trying to capture this particular moment. And I think it really kind of ends 2020 well, because it's just such a very strange year for so many of us. But there was still more. everything is continually changing. And I think that really is what happens, what I've discovered with, railroads or railroading is you don't know what to expect sometimes. I mean, to see this particular engine leading Canadian Pacific's ethanol train with 2 Southern Bells behind it was outstanding. And to top it off, one of my good friends was the conductor on this train. I'm sure he was living it up because he's also a buff and was probably loving everyone else coming out to photograph him. But I don't get to see all the cool things all the time. Sometimes I would wake up on a weekend not knowing exactly what I want to do. I just know I want to get out and photograph something. This is Pan Am Southern 23K. We no longer have the same engines we did because of PTC requirement changes. So even in that short time I've been doing this, we've been seeing changes on our railroad lines. Saturday runs of the local short line sometimes. My 2 friends up here had to work on a Saturday. But at least, I could chase them for a bit. And then sometimes I forget what else is right in town. This is Worcester. And we actually have a railroad tunnel that goes right next to one of the big hospitals here. So it's interesting when you see CSX Q427 comes through the hospital tunnel, you wonder if any of the patients can actually hear the train coming through the tunnel. And then sometimes you just have to go out because everyone's going to be out for these things. These are the CSX Pride and Service engines, and they were in New York. And of course, I had to try to go see them. And this is the Catskill Bridge, Catskill, New York. Catskill Creek, over Catskill Creek, New York. Some other things that were close to home. I think I've been trying to focus more on capturing scenes that are cool scenes as is, but then I just add train. I really do try to make that happen sometimes. And I thought this was a pretty cool scene. Everyone's ice fishing party, and then the train comes through. 2021 kind of changed my perspective. I mean that truly, for a lot of things. And I was able to purchase a drone finally. I've seen a lot of people do it. I researched about what exactly I wanted to do, what I needed to do to become a drone pilot, and the rules I need to follow for FAA. So one of my first attempts after a lot of practice, so I don't crash into things, I took this to the Canton Viaduct. It's a very cool old location on the Northeast Corridor, but they run the commuter train here. There's Amtrak, Acellas, and regionals. So I figured it'd be a good spot to see several trains and try to practice shutter control and a number of other things with an actual train in the image. And I bring you to my favorite shot that I've probably ever taken. I call this one Blood, Sweat, and Tears because I was still kind of learning how to anticipate trains to get into my shot. I loved just the shot even without the train. So one thing I wasn't paying attention to as much was battery level in the drone. I have about 30 minutes or so flying time and probably should budget some of that for landing time. So the battery wasn't running low. And so I brought the drone back. As I was bringing the drone back, I heard the horns blowing for a couple crossings down. Panicked, grabbed the drone while it was still in the air, and didn't notice I sliced my finger at the time. Changed out the batteries, got the drone right up in the air, got it just in time for, this is the Vermont Rail System, White River Junction, Newport train. It's a northbound train, so it's a hard one to kind of find a good spot for photograph it without being in the wrong sort of light. But I got it here just in time, and I took 3 shots before I brought the drone back and noticed, oh, look, I'm bleeding. Quick tried to bandage my finger, got the drone back in the car. And usually the drone sends me a JPEG image on my phone so I can at least look at it before, make sure I got the shot. Unfortunately, the drone did not send those pictures to my phone. And so I was panicking a little bit, a little tearful, because I really, really wanted the shot to work. So blood, because I made myself bleed for real. And I learned not to touch the weed whacker that's flying. Sweat because I wasn't sure I'd make the shot in time, and then tears because I wasn't sure I got the shot. I had to wait till I got home several hours later to check the drone's SD card. Thankfully, so you can see it worked. And to date is one of my favorite photos. I have this hanging. This is also a picture I have hanging in my home. The drone just kind of gives a whole new perspective. As a short person, I really appreciate a little bit of elevation to some of my images. I love using bridges and parking garages when I can, but the drone allows me more better perspectives when I don't have those tools at my disposal. This is in Palmer, Massachusetts. This is QO22 coming through on its way to Worcester. East Deerfield Yard. This is over the Connecticut River. 16R is starting to yard their train. So it gave a couple opportunities to get different angles. But I still took photos with the camera from the ground, including Catskill, New York, and also locally. The picture in the lower right-hand corner is now, these are some of the younger rail fanners out there. And I love this picture because it really kind of illustrates, what we're doing out there. We are all kind of out there for the same train, for the same thrill. And we all like to share this information with each other. Plus, one of my friends was the engineer on this day too, so I think he was having a thrill. He's also a buff. Everyone was here for his train. Another image I would have taken from the ground normally, but in this case I had drones, so I had a different kind of location, different kind of, I could get a little bit more elevation, some reflection, and a bit more of the sky that I wanted. It's always nice when Providence Worcester also puts their match colored engines together rather than the Genesee and Wyoming train colors. And another great image from this year was having the Green Mountain railroad switcher. This is the Alco 405. She was out because the rail system was a bit power short, and so she was acting as the Riverside switcher for that day. So it was great to see her out and about. It's not something that we get to see very often, sadly. I'm hoping that she gets to ride on. She gets to be back on passenger trains because they've not run passenger trains for 2 years now. So the Vermont rail system needs to run more passenger trains so I can come up and photograph them. Another photograph I want to share with you guys is just this one. This is Niantic, Connecticut, along the Northeast Corridor. Just a nice scene that happens to have a train in it. This is in New York. This was my brain is frozen. But a friend of mine had told me I should just come out and see this location because I hadn't been there in a while. And I hadn't actually been to this particular location. Within 10 minutes, we got a train. This is just outside Selkirk. And another common scene in Grafton, the train leaving, but this is a location that is not accessible on foot. So the drone I was able to get that kind of shot. And this one too. There's a lot of different, I've shot the Grafton Upton Railroad so many times. And so with the drone, I'm able to find a couple other locations I'm not really able to access otherwise. And this is just a scene from Pennsylvania. I did go back to Pennsylvania again to a Bridgeview bed and breakfast. I highly recommend it. Just if you just want different photographs of trains, I could probably do a whole presentation just on the photographs I've taken here, either from the ground or from the air. And I really wanted to drone at this location. This is Strasburg Railroad with the Queen of Steam 611. Unfortunately, there was a temporary flight restriction in effect, so I could not fly the drone that day. So everything had to be from the ground. But here's another view of Rockville. I took so many different photographs of this particular bridge with all different trains on it all day, every day for several days. And this is Tokanak Viaduct. It's very difficult to get a train. They don't run any trains over this, not as often as they used to. But with some help with some friends on social media, we were able to pinpoint the location of this particular train, and I was able to capture it with the drone. It was very tricky because when I arrived to the location, it was cloudy out, and it was so foggy I couldn't see the viaduct. I couldn't fly the drone. If I'm going to follow FAA regulations, I may have to be able to see my aircraft. I would not have been able to see 10 feet in front of me. Luckily, the fog lifted, and luckily the train was running a little bit late, so everything happened to work out in the end. It's such a great scene, and it's such quite historic viaduct. This is the world famous Horseshoe Curve with the Norfolk Southern Heritage Unit leading. The drone is just unbelievable, the amount of possible angles you can get at this particular location. I love it because you can hear all the trains all around you as they navigate around the curve. Try to hurt a little bit. I have a lot of photos, and I took a lot out before presenting today because there's just, I just want to try to show the best of the best, but there's just so many. I love them all. This is the Framingham Leominster local, again from the location I would not have been able to get from the ground. They're crossing the Fitchburg Secondary over the Pan Am line. So this is where two different railroads kind of cross over each other. Trains don't travel very frequently here, so at least nowadays. That may change if Pan Am is actually bought out by CSX, but that will remain to be seen. But it's a really cool image with really good light and really good look at some of Clinton, Massachusetts old buildings. Each have their own history. I won't go into today, but it's definitely a very cool old city. This is another look at one of Cape Cod Central's excursion trains, but from a completely different angle. So this is in West Barnstable, Massachusetts, over one of the salt marsh areas. Way in the distance, there's the ocean. It's just so quintessential Cape Cod. I really, really like how this one came out. And it's just great being with the drone. It really does give me an opportunity to really kind of find different places, just a different location, a different perspective. And this is Springfield, Massachusetts. I don't do cityscapes a lot. Kind of worried about crashing the drone into stuff, but as long as you obtain permission through the FAA apps to fly in certain locations, you can fly almost anywhere as long as it's not near an airport. So this one I was able to get one of Amtrak's special 50th anniversary units right next to a celebration down by the riverfront with a city in the background, and it's just perfect. A great scene with a train. This is the Apico annual train excursion. This is a group of people who own private cars. They meet for a convention every year in Burlington, Vermont, and then they also go on excursions. So Vermont Rail Systems got some of their shiny red engines to lead the excursion. In this case, this is past Ludlow, Vermont. And this is shot that's only possible really by drone. There's no place on the ground to really get a great shot of this particular trestle. So I know it's been done before by other people with drones, but it's a great challenge for me to attempt this as well. But the color is just starting to turn here. And this is one of my days off to go chase trains because I really wanted some foliage. They can't do better than Vermont with the Jersey cows in the foreground and 3 different colored running along the tracks here. And if you remember that image I showed you earlier, CSX B724 in the swamp, this is a completely different perspective. Now I'm able to get a bunch of a completely different shot of it. And the grasses have grown a little bit. You see a little bit more of the track here, but it's just also, it's still another location you really don't expect to see a train. You can see little patches of water there. I'll come back in the spring when these grasses are gone, and it'll look like this train is just going right through a real swamp. And for the last part, I've included 2 recent images. This is back. This is French's Hollow. I finally remembered it. So this is the other side of French's Hollow. You don't really get to see this part of the dam that most people don't get to see, but the drone allows that to happen. So I think it's just a very cool way to just kind of get a different perspective on things that you may not have realized you could. And my last image for today is an image I took since last drone image I took. This is Connecticut Southern over the Connecticut River. And I think I've come a long way, looking at this image from just getting my start, just photographing trains, and I've learned so much in the past 2.5 years. And what I'm really looking forward to is having snow on the ground and trying to get some photos with trains in the snow. So I think, the more I do this, the more different angles I can do, the more different ideas I'm coming up with. So I think that's it. That's all I have. But if you would like to see more of what I did, because I definitely did not show you everything that I've done, you can find me on Flickr. Todd mentioned Instagram. I've been there probably the longest. I do post daily, so I try to space out things that I take. And then I am on Facebook as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen. I mean, that was great. And I think you vocalized a really important element of amateur photography and really any hobby, that getting that mental break from really stressful jobs. And I think that's something that is, a way a lot of people approach real photography, especially in our audience. So it's really important to have that aspect in our lives. And I think I speak for everyone here in welcoming you to the rail community. There's a lot of knowledge and warmth in this group, and it's one of the most important outreaches that we try to provide as a center, is to create those connections between people in this field. And I think despite being new to the field of rail photography, the photos you make, the locations that you find, and the subjects that you're tackling, I mean, you're already setting yourself apart on Instagram, clearly, if you caught Todd's eye. And I think a lot of our audience will be wanting to hear some more details of your locations. Particularly, I've had quite a few questions about those.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I probably should have put them up with the pictures. It was an afterthought. And I was thinking back, I grew up with railroads in the back of my house. And so I saw the Providence of Worcester often, and I never really thought, at the time to take a photo of that. I took growing up with it, kind of took it for granted. It was only later seeing it through my son's eyes, I was like, oh, wow, I should have done that.
Yeah. Well, we're at time, but what I'll say is that we'll take questions until 25 past the hour, so we can have at least a 5-minute break in case anyone wants to go to the bathroom, if they don't want to leave their computer for even a minute of all these fantastic presentations that we're having today. So yeah, remember to send some questions into the chat if you have any questions for Jen. And I'll just get us started off here. So Jen, as a self-described newcomer to the hobby, how have you seen yourself improve and evolve as a railroad photographer since you've started?
So I definitely feel like my composition has improved. I'm definitely not focusing like on the power of the train. I'm focusing more like what scene am I trying to create. So like the scene of the Vermont rail system train, I really, really wanted the Connecticut River in that shot. That particular job it runs right along the Connecticut River up in Vermont, the New Hampshire border. It's the people who were actually, on that train. It's one of their favorite ones too, because for the scenery. And so I really wanted to kind of capture that. So anytime I'm going out there, it's like right now the Pan Am office car special is out there. And if I can manage to go after the presentation, I'm already thinking about, where the best location would be. I've also been looking at more about thinking about the different, where the sun is coming in and how do I want that, sometimes I would definitely scout out locations. Like the first time I went out to see the Housatonic Railroad, I will actually kind of scout out that area because the past used to run much slower, but now they've laid different rail down, so their speeds are much faster. It's harder to get photos, so you kind of have to plan ahead now, a lot more than you were able to do so before. So yeah, I see myself planning a lot more than I used to because I want the shots I want, or I have a lot better idea of what I want to create.
Jen, a couple of observation questions. How much would you say your art background that you mentioned at the beginning of the presentation has informed or influenced your railroad photography, composition, color, those things, or how much has it been sort of learning while you're photographing? But can you speak a little bit more about that?
So it's not been something that's been kind of mindful from the beginning, but I would have other people comment to me, is like, wow, Jen, I really like your composition. You have a good eye. And then it would make me stop and reflect. It's like, oh, you're right. I didn't really think about it that way. Because it's something that's always come naturally to me. I don't really think about it, and I'm doing it. But I'm definitely more conscious of it now that people have spoken to me about it. So maybe a bit more self-conscious what about their photographing.
Well, you have a natural ability that way, that both, stunning in composition, and also I see a lot in the appreciation of light, but light in the color aspects that you draw, both in the rolling stock and not only the train, but the scene and storytelling. The other quick question, I think there's been some viewers asking similarly, the network of friends, the railroading network you have, what is or how are the ways you communicate about what's happening on the lines? And do you use a scanner, for example? What are your tools, or what's your tool set?
It definitely helps when I have friends out there, and we'll communicate either through Facebook Messenger, Instagram, text message, anything they can think of, really. I also have a scanner, so for times where I am by myself, I can tune in, so I can know like if people are switching. Some railroads it's a bit harder. I know New Hampshire, North Coast, they don't operate on scanner frequencies, and so sometimes it's help of a friend who might be in the area, that kind of thing. For some cases, I know I'm further away, so I definitely depend on friends like who are out chasing something that's everyone else is out chasing. I've talked to people about how they used to do things, and sometimes before social media, before phones even, it was kind of one of those things you just kind of show up the track and wait for things to happen. But then again, there used to be a lot more trains running in general. So where I am, there's just not as many trains as there used to be. So I'm not going to go out if I know nothing's coming. Or I'll go out to New York if I want to see more trains and more locations at a time.
Dan, I wanted to compliment you on, it's an amazing quality of work for being at this only about 2.5 years. I think your color is fantastic. The compositions are wonderful. I'm just kind of curious. It sounds like you've been, well, it said, you grew up with the Providence and Worcester in your backyard, but I mean, so have you been paying attention to, prior to the 2.5 years, were you looking at train magazines, and what else were you doing in terms of this activity to sort of satisfy your visual curiosity about railroading?
Like I said, there aren't a lot of trains that run me. I think the most frequent trains we have are probably the BTA commuter trains, and so those are probably the ones I saw most frequently. And I think it was, they were always kind of back in my mind, but like I said before, I was always so focused on my career, getting to where I was going, without realizing that, hey, I went to school in Worcester. Worcester is like Railroad Central once upon a time. Conrail was there. And I just had no idea because I was so focused on other things. I think if I happened to see a train, I would stop. But I didn't have a camera at the time either, so it's hard to kind of reflect back. I've actually been trying to look back through photos I've taken over the years to see if I've caught something in the past. And in my travels, I definitely have photos from trains. When I was in New Zealand for almost 2 months, and they have the Kingston Flyer down there. And at the time, it was still a pretty popular excursion railroad. And so I took a lot of photos while I was down there. But it was with a point and shoot cameras before I bought the camera I use now, which is an Olympus mirrorless camera. So the interest was still there, and I definitely took advantage when I could, but I just wasn't always actively out there. I didn't have train magazines or anything like that. And the person I was working with in New Zealand at the time was definitely a buff in the greatest sense. He was a 60-year-old orthopedic researcher, and he had a layout in his basement, and he was like, "Jen, you gotta go see the Kingston Flyer while you're here. It's like one of New Zealand's greatest things." I'm like, okay, fine. We'll go see it. And loved it. In Australia, they had I was there for a couple weeks, and saw their commuter operations there. Again, my point and shoot just wasn't good enough for some of those faster trains. I have a few photos. Nothing amazing though.
But believe me, in 25 years, you'll probably fondly look back at the point and shoot pictures as well. You record a certain kind of history.
Yeah, I used to also work in, my work adventures took me to York, England, where the National Railway Museum is. And so it was within walking distance of my hotel. So I spent a lot of time there. Just unfortunately never when there were any excursions.
And it seems like this is something you do a lot with your son, right? Does he accompany you quite a lot of the time, or?
Yes. So, there's some of the days where he's in school and I'm just taking a day for me.
Right.
Well, a lot of other times, most of the other times he's with me. I think I've probably surpassed him in like the enthusiasm for the trains, but there's some days where he's just totally in it.
Okay.
Does he have a camera yet?
Yes.
Yeah, good question.
Yes, he does. He has a waterproof camera, so yeah. If he drops it in a puddle, no big deal. It'll still take pictures.
Awesome.
Great.
Well,